What makes Seven's remix bass hit so hard? How can you make it yourself? Let's dive in. Alright, to begin, I'm selecting an MPT preset in Serum. This is a main bass line that I've written, have a listen. For the start, I'm choosing the PWM wave shape from Serum's analog oscillator A. I'm not changing the octave, semitone or fine tune setting. I'm also keeping the unison at 1. Since this oscillator A is a core of our bass sound and I want this part to be mono and centered, the unison will remain at 1. From the warp section, I'm selecting the ASYM option. If you look here, this option modifies the wave shape. Listen. I want this option to have a dynamic feel and change over time, so I'm connecting LFO1 to the warp knob. For LFO1, I'm activating the envelope and shaping the curve like this. This means that whenever a note is played, the wave shape will change over time according to this curve. I think it sounds cool now, but you can also change the rate value. In this mode, it syncs with the track's BPM. We also have a wavetable position now, which I'm bringing up to about here. It does a bit of amplitude works and increase the volume. I'm setting its value close to 60, which is acceptable for this sound. Okay, I turn off oscillator A for now. In oscillator B, I'm again choosing the PWM wave shape. This time, I'm setting the unison to 2 and reducing the detune amount to add a wider sound to our final output. I'm also slightly decreasing the fine tune to create a phase difference compared to oscillator A. I'm also changing the wavetable position. Let's listen to see which sounds better. This is pretty good now. In the warp section here, I'm selecting the remap 1 option. This allows us to manually change the wave shape using a curve. Now listen, you'll hear what it does to the sound. In this mode, when I decrease and increase the remap amount, the low end slightly changes. I'll choose this amount. I'm routing oscillator A to the filter and I'm setting the filter type to MG low 12. Since I only wanted to affect oscillator A, I'm only activating the A option here. I'm also activating the key track option here so that the filter cutoff frequency responds to the played notes. I'm setting the frequency to around 500 Hz and I'm also increasing the resonance. I'm not changing the pan and I'm slightly increasing the fat amount. Up to this point, this is our main bass sound. For the sub bass, I'm choosing a simple sawtooth wave to add another layer to our sound. That's it. We have corrected our main layers, now we just need to balance the level of each layer. In the original track, there is an interesting characteristic. In the intro section, there is a mid-bass element on top of the sub-bass, meaning it's not just the low end, you can also hear a higher frequency sound. Here, our oscillator B and the sub are doing this job. I want to connect their lever to the velocity. This means that when a note is played with higher velocity, you'll hear the higher frequency parts, and when you play with low velocity, you'll hear only the low end. To do this, I am setting the level of the sub and oscillator B to 0 and connecting the velocity to them. The result is that when you play a note with low velocity, you only hear oscillator A, and when you play with a high velocity, you also hear oscillator B and the sub. Now I'll practically show you this in the piano roll. Now the velocity is quite low, but we can still hear a bit of oscillator B and the sub. If I lower it further, the sound of the B and the sub decreases. This can give us interesting ideas during arranging and note writing, similar to the original track where we had the high range sound in the bass during the intro, but in the vocal section we didn't have this sound and only had the sub bass. Alright, that covers the wave shape adjustment and the main sound design. Now let's move on the effects section to make the sound better. In the effects section, first of all, I'm adding a filter that will operate before the others. I'm choosing the low 24 filter type and setting the cutoff to 2000 Hz. We don't need a lot of high frequencies in the bass, so this amount is sufficient for cleaning up the sound a bit, reducing the need for excessive equalization during the mixing stage. The next effect I'm adding is a distortion, and I'm setting its model to SYM and shaping it like this. I'm increasing the drive a bit and reducing the mix. This is the effect it has on our sound. I'm also adding a reverb to add some reverb to the higher frequencies. This can yield good results on sounds like this. I'm reducing the size, a decay of around 4 seconds is good. And I'm increasing the low cut because I don't want the reverb in the low frequencies. I'm also reducing the high cut and setting the spin to 0. Let me increase the velocity a bit so you can hear the reverb effect more clearly. Okay, it's added a nice room to our sound. For the equalizer, I'm adding a bell point around 350 Hz and boosting that section a bit to increase the frequency there. I'm also slightly increasing the high end. Now, before all of this, we also need a compressor, which I'll place before all the effects. I'm using a multiband compressor and setting the low band to around 50 and adjusting the others similarly. It seems like the result is good so far. We'll adjust the rest during the track. Now let's go to the mixing section to see how we can make the bass sound even better. Okay, I've set up a very simple loop, so we can hear the bass sound along with the drums and explain how to mix it to achieve a sound similar to the original track. Before we go to the mixer, one important point. In this type of music, your kick drum doesn't need to be very big and boomy. Try to remove the unnecessary low-end frequency from the kick as much as possible so it sounds very snappy and punchy. By doing this, you'll have much more headroom during the mixing and mastering stages. I've removed the extra low end and kept the main punch. This is a mixer channel for the bass and our goal is to add a sidechain. There is an LFO Tool plugin that's very simple and lightweight and does its jobs perfectly. There are many similar plugins, or you can even create a traditional sidechain using a compressor and a kick drum signal. But this plugin works well for us. I'm setting the start point to 0. Just one golden tip. Never use a sip or 90 degrees slopes. Always leave a little space to avoid adding click-like noise to the sound. When you bring it all the way to the end, a noise is added in this section. It's enough to leave a small gap at the end. We'll set up a curve like this. Listen to the result. I think the result is very good. Okay, that's the LFO Tool section. Now let's look at the note writing for this bass. For writing the notes in this style, as you can see in the image, the bass don't move between 2 octaves. In some places at the end of the measure, we have used the root notes of the chord to create a passage-like feel, which adds a groove and variation. This style of bassline was very popular during the era of Benny Benassi and global DJs, and it still maintains its appeal. This bassline heavily utilizes short notes, which gives the music an engaging groove. You have a lot of freedom when writing these notes. Also, notice that some of the notes are off the beat to create a syncopated feel. Again, there is no specific rule for writing this. The golden tip is simply to have movement between several octaves and a swing feel. Let's listen to it together once. These are the root notes of the F chords, and these are the G notes, and it jumps between 2 octaves. During the sound design in the synth, we connected the volume of oscillator B and the sub-oscillator to velocity. Now you can use it here. For example, these notes in the higher octave might sound a bit loud, which we can reduce. What happens in the synth is that in places where the velocity is low, oscillator B and the sub are heard less, and oscillator A become more prominent. Now if we do the opposite, increase the velocity of the higher notes will be heard more. This is entirely your preference. For instance, you can randomly decrease and increase the velocity. Or you can adjust the velocity linearly, meaning it starts from a low velocity and gradually increases, which is almost similar to having a low-pass filter automation. That's the sound, thanks for watching. If this helped, please like, comment and subscribe. More sound design tutorials coming soon. See you next time.